In today's episode of Wistoria, Will finally faces the harsh reality of the tower after surviving the disaster at Terminalia. Even though he risked his life and defeated monsters no ordinary student could handle, the people at the top still refuse to acknowledge him as a true mage. The episode begins right after Will defeats the summoned monsters in front of the tower factions. Everyone in the hall is shocked because they had never expected someone without magic to survive that battle. A massive magic circle suddenly activates beneath Will's feet, and one after another, the great factions of the tower begin reacting to him. The Ice faction shows interest first, followed by the Fire faction, Wind faction, Earth faction, and even the Dark faction. The symbols of multiple elite factions start glowing across the arena, proving that they all acknowledge Will's talent. The students watching are completely stunned because this almost never happens in the tower's history. A boy who was mocked his entire life for having no magic is suddenly being recognized by some of the strongest factions in the world. However, there is one important detail that immediately catches everyone's attention. The Lightning faction refuses to choose him. Clary then explains that when multiple factions show interest in a candidate, the candidate has the right to choose their own faction. Hearing this makes Will incredibly happy because he immediately thinks about joining Elfaria's faction. But just before he can answer, Harlon interrupts him. The atmosphere inside the tower instantly changes. Harlon says that what Will used cannot truly be called magic. According to him, Will only borrowed power and relied on brute force. He claims that Will's fighting style belongs to a warrior, not a mage. Elfie immediately argues back, saying that Will clearly used magical energy during the fight, but Harlon refuses to acknowledge it. Harlon then decides to test Will personally. With a single spell, he summons two strange monsters created by the tower's research division. He explains that these creatures were specifically designed to resist physical attacks. To prove his point, Harlon casually destroys one creature with magic. The monster instantly disintegrates, but then the second monster charges directly toward Will. Will immediately cuts it in half with his sword. However, the creature simply regenerates. The entire audience goes silent. Will attacks again and again, but every strike becomes meaningless. The monster reforms each time as if nothing happened. He tries targeting the creature's core, thinking that maybe destroying its center will stop it. But even the core is made of magical liquid that instantly repairs itself. Then electricity erupts from the monster's body. The energy forces Will backward and damages his sword arm. Seeing Will struggle like this makes many students frustrated. Some of the students he previously saved want to help him by casting support magic from the sidelines. But Harlon forbids anyone from interfering. To him, this is Will's final chance to prove whether he belongs in the tower. Will continues fighting despite his injuries. Even though every attack fails, he refuses to step back. Eventually, the monster lands a direct hit and throws Will across the arena. Even then, Will slowly forces himself back to his feet. At that moment, Harlon suddenly ends the battle himself. He dismisses the monster and announces that the test is over. According to him, the result is obvious. Will lacks the magical ability necessary to become a true mage. Harlon proposes using Will as a research subject so the tower can study the mysterious power known as Whis. Hearing this makes Elfie furious. She accuses Harlon of treating Will like an experiment instead of a person. But before the argument escalates further, Gio interrupts the discussion. Gio reminds everyone that another bloom ceremony is approaching soon. That means Will still has one final chance. Clary announces this decision to all the students. Anyone who failed to get selected this time must train harder and prove themselves during the next bloom. After hearing this, Will regains some hope. Even though he failed today, he still has another opportunity. The meeting finally ends, and the faction leaders leave the hall. But while everyone walks away, Will collapses from exhaustion. Julius approaches him and asks whether he's crying. Will laughs weakly and says something important. He says that every time he thinks he's getting closer to his dream, life knocks him back down again. But no matter how many times that happens, he refuses to quit. Meanwhile, Gio's assistant asks why Gio didn't recruit Will himself. Gio smiles and gives a mysterious answer. He says that people who climb back up after falling become far stronger than people who never struggled in the first place. Later that night, we see Will alone inside the library. Instead of resting, he studies magic books nonstop. Will starts analyzing his own powers and finally reaches an important conclusion. Other students begin noticing how obsessed Will has become with training. First time, a few classmates begin respecting him. Emma even approaches Will and invites him to train with the others inside the dungeon before the next bloom. But before Will can answer, Julius suddenly appears. To everyone's surprise, Julius announces that Will train with him personally. The students are shocked because Julius previously looked down on Will. At first, Julius acts confident and noble, saying he wants Will on his side. But the episode reveals Julius's real motives. He believes helping Will could improve his standing with Elfie and increase his chances of joining the Ice faction. Even so, his training advice turns out to be extremely valuable. Julius takes Will to a quiet area and uses ice magic to summon guardian birds filled with magical energy. Then he explains the key idea behind Will's training. Instead of learning traditional spells, Will must learn how to store magical energy inside his body for long periods of time. The goal is simple but extremely difficult. Turn borrowed power into his own power. Will immediately becomes excited because this is the first time someone has given him a realistic path forward instead of just mocking him. The episode ends with Will beginning his special training. At the same time, a mysterious witch watches Will and Julius from a distance, curious to see what kind of results this special training will produce. And with that, the episode finally comes to an end. Will this special training finally allow him to prove himself at the next bloom? Or will the gap between him and the true mages become even greater? Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.